the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
Nabukalu. Catherine is a project coordinator at the District of Columbia's Sustainable Energy Utility. She obtained her master's degree in environmental studies from the University of Pennsylvania and her honors bachelor's degree in logistics and supply chain management at Ashton University in UK. So Catherine has established herself as a young leader in the field of sustainable energy and is an honoree of a range of awards in business sustainability, including the Renewable Energy Markets Fellowship from the Center for Resource Solutions in 2017 and the Green Bees Emerging Leaders in 2017. So in 2020, she was featured on the 30 under 30 list of youth leaders in sustainability by Greenpeace, and that's how I got introduced to her. She was an author of the 30th Foresight Brief of the United Nations on the environmental implications of charcoal as an energy commodity. So today, Catherine is going to talk about how to utilize waste for charcoal production and the issue of global energy security. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about waste utilization for charcoal production and what that means in terms of the question of energy security. But before I do that, I'll spend like 2 minutes letting you know how this started. I was a student at Penn and I started researching with my professor, Rita Guerre, and we were talking about energy broadly, different forms of energy.
Sorry to interrupt you, but can you go to the slide show mode?
Slide view.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yep. Thanks.
Yes. So we started talking about energy security. And as we were talking, I lived in Africa for like 20 years. I'm also African from Uganda. And I felt that charcoal was not being talked about, despite being everywhere pretty much in the energy mix. So I started this research there with him, and we published a few book chapters on the subject. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you. So briefly, our agenda is here. We're going to talk about the global demand for charcoal as an energy resource and also in other aspects like industrial demand. We'll talk about charcoal production and its trade, and then its status as a renewable resource, its production with agricultural materials, but also from and other alternatives which are not freshly cut trees. We'll also talk a little bit about ESG and carbon financing, carbon credits in forestry, which may impact the charcoal sector. And finally, we'll talk about the future of charcoal. So the first thing is charcoal is not coal. A lot of people would use these words interchangeably, coal and charcoal, because they have those 4 letters together. But coal is actually a mineral, which you get by mining. It's beneath the earth. But charcoal is made from trees. It's what you would buy in a bag looking something like this. In Europe and North America, you can get it for $8 to $12 for 3 kilograms. And if you can see this sample that I've shared on the screen, this is about 3.6 kilograms. So that can be about $12. And then in Europe, it's just about the same price, but it's one for the same amount of charcoal, you could get it for 199 euros, and it's mostly used for barbecuing. In the sub-Saharan market, the way charcoal is traded is very different. It's very negotiable, so people just agree on how much charcoal they're buying with the seller, and then they don't weigh it. They sell it by volume. And for that amount, 3 kilograms, it's about 75 cents. So you can see that charcoal is much cheaper, first because it's ubiquitous and it's everywhere. And the other thing I want you to notice here is that there are no labels on the containers for charcoal. So basically, customers are not really warned about the dangers of using charcoal, for example, carbon monoxide poisoning, which would be different in Western markets. So over the past 30 years, charcoal production has gone up consistently. In 1993, it was about 30 million tons, and it went all the way up to 59 million tons in 2023. And you can see, I think, which is recent to a year, which is recent to most of us in the room, is 2019. It was about 53 million tons. But even then, it has already gone up and almost doubled since they first started tracking charcoal as wood charcoal. So this chart has a lot of information, but let's first start with part A. Most charcoal is being produced in Africa. And then secondly, Americas, Asia's, a little bit from Europe and Oceania. To part B shows that a lot of charcoal is coming from tropical countries. For example, Brazil, the Congo, DRC is the Congo, Thailand, and Ghana. So these countries have a lot of forests, but it also comes from places without forests. For example, Egypt, Ethiopia. Those countries have very few forests compared to their actual land, but they are also some of the top 10 producers of charcoal in the world. In part C, we look at the exporters of charcoal. Now, not all top producers are also exporters. You have Nigeria and China, which are consistent in terms of production and export, but a lot of countries are also producing charcoal for export. Some of them are tropical. For example, Indonesia, Argentina, those are tropical, but you still have countries like Somalia, which are nearly semi-desert, also coming up, and Namibia coming up among the top exporters. So they're using their few forests they have, producing this type of energy for export, which brings us to part D. Who are the top importers in the world of charcoal? It's Germany, Japan, Republic of Korea. You can notice here, the first thing to notice here is these countries actually have a lot of electricity supply, and they have the purported higher energy security compared to many countries that are on the production side of charcoal. So the UK, France, the USA, they are importing a lot of charcoal, which explains partly in part A that much as they have low demand on their own soil, like locally, they are actually importing. So low production in the local sense does not mean that there is no demand for charcoal as a source of fuel. So first, this is the process of rudimentary charcoal production. It starts with cutting trees, and then those logs are piled in different styles. For example, this one here. And then the pile is covered with mud, which then forms what we call an earth mound kiln. The producer then sets fire into the kiln, and it burns up these trees, and they release a lot of the toxic gases that are within the tree stems. That process is called pyrolysis. In Brazil, they tend to have these cement kilns, so the producers would move these logs to this stationary kiln and feed all these trees into the hopper, into the cement kiln, and then conduct the pyrolysis process from a stationary kiln. When the charcoal is ready, the producer harvests it like this. Usually they use their hands and hand tools and then pack it in sacks for transportation. And because charcoal is very lightweight, it invites overloading. So most of the charcoal trucks that you see in big cities will be loaded like this. So they're not really mindful of the vehicle limits. In charcoal production, there's so much in terms of emission, but let's look on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, we see that there's a lot of emissions, pollution, and when the people produce charcoal, they tend to be very close to the kilns and they breathe in all these toxic gases because there's just no other way to monitor the system of pyrolysis. But on the right, on the other side, we have the CO2 emissions from other types of energy. For example, you're comparing nuclear, hydro, and other renewables, including fossil fuels. So we see that the fossil fuels are the worst. They're producing a lot of CO2 emissions. But the most interesting thing with charcoal is these are the pollutants, the particulate matter and the sulfur dioxide, which the producers are breathing in. So these are also harmful for air. But because charcoal production is very rudimentary and done in open forests, there's just not been a good way of measuring its impact in terms of charcoal production. So charcoal is transported in very many ways, for example, with boats. And for the last mile to get to the last market stall, it's usually taken by bicycle because it's very lightweight. But for the exporters, this picture here on the right-hand side, this is charcoal export in Somalia. So this is to show that charcoal is traded in small quantities and large quantities, but it also goes as far as big international markets. So charcoal travels very long distances to go from where it's produced to the places where it's consumed. So this is actually an extract of a book chapter that we're publishing on where charcoal is produced and where the nomads go to produce it. So if you look in the map with the diagram, the broken lines show the flow of charcoal, and the solid lines show the movement of the workers. It shows that the workers are going very long distances, close to 500 kilometers, to produce the charcoal because the trees are getting scarce. And charcoal is coming from as far as possible to get to the urban areas, which, by the way, already have electricity. So it's a very interesting industry because charcoal is coming also from islands. As you can see on the right-hand side, there's some boats that fetch it from these islands to bring it back to the cities for people who have electricity to consume. In the sub-Saharan market, it's traded like this. It's displayed on the road without labels. So clearly here, the consumers are not warned about the dangers of charcoal, but also it's not traded by weight. And there's a lot of stockpiling in the roadsides, and it's sold in wholesale as well. So a big sack of charcoal, which is about that length, costs only $12. So I think that's a very good picture because it shows that it is not very expensive, basically, to damage the environment. People will damage the environment for a very small sum, although this is a very common way of consuming energy for cooking in sub-Saharan Africa. But the international wood charcoal market is valued at 1.8 billion as of 2023. And in 2019, this was only 1.4 billion, still significant, but it has jumped in such a small space of 4 to 5 years. So 1.8 billion, which shows that more countries are importing charcoal, and charcoal is becoming more expensive because the trees are getting scarce. So this shows us the exporters. It kind of expands what we talked about earlier. So there's more countries exporting, and this slide here shows us the importers. More countries are still importing charcoal, and charcoal is becoming more expensive because it's less common, and the raw materials are getting scarce. Now, charcoal is also used in the steel industry. For example, it's used as a reductant and in sintering and pelletizing in the production of steel because it is carbon. Brazil, that's very common in the Amazon rainforests. They're cutting a lot of charcoal for the pig iron industry. And even though Brazil has a lot of electricity, Brazilians also still use charcoal for the local home use. It's also used to transfer quartz, to make quartz silicon in Namibia. and also in Brazil. So a lot of charcoal that is imported to the USA is actually for industrial use in the silicon industry because it's used in the production of solar panels. The steel industry traditionally used to use coal, but because of the carbon tax, they're moving towards using charcoal. It is more expensive. It's because of the carbon tax. There's a carbon tax of, it used to be $30 to $35 per ton of CO2, but now it's rising in some countries to $167 per ton of CO2 that is emitted. So clearly, because charcoal is emitting less than coal, people want to transfer to using charcoal, even though charcoal is a wood product that is, they call it renewable, but that's to be seen because Brazil is having a lot of monocultures and biodiversity is being affected because of the heavy use of charcoal. And some countries in the EU are favoring hydrogen rather than cutting trees. In charcoal production, not all the logs get pyrolyzed completely. Some of the logs that don't go through the process are abandoned at the site. And at the end use in the market, when charcoal is being transported because of a lot of pressure on in the trucks, a lot of it disintegrates and this cannot be used in its form. Also, a lot of people use it to just keep the flame burning in their homes, but there is a lot of waste too that is coming from the charcoal sector. When it's used in the homes, the wood ash remains. And so far, the collection, it's difficult to collect wood ash because basically people cook independently in different homes. But when it's collected, it can be used as a fertilizer because it contains lime and potassium, which is good for plants. There's a trend. When we did our recent field work, we found that some people are producing charcoal from waste. For example, in this location in Uganda, these people in the tents, if you can see the left-hand side, they had been hired to do reforestation at this site. But then as they were living in these forests, they were also using charcoal logs to produce charcoal. The logs of the eucalyptus trees to produce charcoal. And you can see the forest on the other side while a harvest cycle is happening on one side of the forest. So this is the same location, and you can see the earth mount kiln on the right-hand side has been piled, and all these raw materials are coming from waste trees of the waste of the eucalyptus. Charcoal can also be produced from agriculture waste. These are some of the examples that would be used: the cotton stalks and coconut shell. A lot of these would make charcoal, and I think it's common in the market as briquettes. So it's not the same as wood charcoal, and it's an alternative to reduce the pressure on forests as the only source of wood to produce charcoal. And this is how briquette production happens. The waste is crushed and mixed and then fed into a hopper, which presses the briquettes like this, and then they can be dried in the sun. So it takes virtually low costs to dry the briquettes once they're produced. So this is a very effective method of burning charcoal in the northern Uganda. So the main problem with charcoal is that it's really misunderstood as the energy of the poor who lack alternatives. For example, a lot of people would say they're using charcoal because they don't have electricity. But in this study, we've seen that a lot of countries that already have electricity are also importing charcoal as an energy alternative. So we should then question whether only poor people are using charcoal, or are we using charcoal based on the need or its uniqueness as a resource? And secondly, it's a very informal sector. As you saw in building the earth mount kilns, it doesn't require any measurement of inputs, and their outputs as well, including the pollution, the pollutants, are not really measured. So it limits the strategic improvement of the sector. And the public health impacts are not widely known by the users. As you saw, there's not packaging involved in most of the sub-Saharan market. And so consumers may not know that carbon monoxide poisoning happens from use of charcoal. And in the Western world, because it's overshadowed by better and modern alternatives, it's not really considered a contributor to energy security. So this is a report. The latest report is still the latest from the International Chamber of Commerce. They were talking about energy security in the US and basically ranking energy security of all different countries. And this is the rank that they came up with different scores in different countries. So you can see that a lot of the countries that appear in this list, they have good scores for energy security. You have the US, the UK, France, Germany. All these countries here appear as low risk for energy security, right? But they also appeared among those that are importing charcoal in terms of top 10 in the whole world. But this report doesn't actually mention the word charcoal. So it's a question of whether is charcoal considered even in terms of studies as a source of energy, or is it not considered a source of energy security, given that it is reliable, it's ubiquitous, and it's pretty much everywhere, but it's not, in terms of, by definition, not considered a source of energy security. So the future of charcoal, emerging economies will continue to demand charcoal, and they do rely heavily on it. And demand will increase in the steel industry because there is a carbon tax. It's affecting the prices of coal and even the prices of using coal as a resource in manufacturing, especially in steel. Thirdly, there's indiscriminate tree cutting. All trees can make charcoal, and all species can be used to make charcoal as long as the people that produce charcoal don't actually measure the age of the trees. They just cut down the trees. So it's very indiscriminate in terms of raw material selection. Although in Brazil, they really prefer eucalyptus, but any other tree could do. Eucalyptus, they prefer it because it can grow in such a short time. It's 5 to 7 years, and then cut it for charcoal. And the trees are getting scarce. There's a lot of artificial price increase. And as you saw, as a comparison, the global charcoal market was about 1.4 billion in 2019, but now it's 1.8 billion. So as the trees get scarce, charcoal prices are going up as well. And there's a lot of public health risks. They might still be unknown to many users because there are no labels on the products. And briquettes can be made from available raw materials depending on the country or the origin. And that's it. Do we have any questions?
I don't know what's happening with my, there we go. I got frozen. But anyways, like Catherine, as usual, very interesting. So I think that again, like we'll open the floor for questions, but one of the things